This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from?
And by the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. As a nonprofit, we rely on support from listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider a donation. To learn more and make a gift, visit us at www.gosuperior.org.
Welcome to the Lake Superior Podcast. I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida Waara. We are made stronger by story, and there's no better source than the continent's largest body of fresh water, Lake Superior.
So join us as we highlight the 5 national parks that ring this greatest of the Great Lakes, meet the people, tour the places, and learn about the projects that make these parks and body of water so remarkable.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida Waara.
Welcome once again to the Lake Superior Podcast. This time, Frida, actually talking to someone that is currently based out of a place that I know very well, up toward the Houghton, Michigan area at Michigan Tech University. You've got an interesting guest here lined up for us.
Well, Walt, tell me about your first job. I mean, I don't think you weren't flipping burgers at the A&W, right?
No, as a matter of fact, I combined my interests in announcing our area's history because I grew up in Chassell, Michigan, which is just south of Houghton, Michigan, where Michigan Tech University is. And my first job was working for a mine that was really more of an adit, but it was called the Arcadian Copper Mine in Ripley. I was a tour guide there for several years and learned a lot about the mining history and shared that with visitors to the mine over the years when I worked there back in the mid to late 80s. And it was interesting to learn about that because mining in particular with the area known as the Copper Country, well, it was called that because it was copper mining up there. But that ties into what we're going to really be talking about here today.
Do you have any idea how many miles of tunnels the Arcadian mine was?
It was not a very large mine. It was, I want to say we went in about quarter mile. I can't remember. It's in those, those old days of yesteryear in my brain, but it was sort of an adit, which is more of a access point on the hillside that goes to a mine shaft. Right. But it was tied into what was going on with the Quincy mine and the hoist operation. All that turned into a tourist attraction back in like the 50s and 60s. But it was not a very large one, but it is right there next to Quincy, which is one of the biggest, the number 2 shaft in that area. But I don't need to talk about this. We want to talk to our guest here today, who is Tim Scarlett, who is an associate professor of archaeology at Michigan Tech University in Houghton. Welcome to the podcast, Tim.
Thank you, Walt.
It is interesting because you have, you're here to talk about underground mines, underground mapping. Let's talk a little bit about that. How did you get involved in mapping the underground mines? Where did this all come from and start for you?
It's such a funny question, actually, because as an archaeologist, many people would not immediately associate archaeology and mining history, but it makes perfect sense, really, because in my career as an anthropologist and an archaeologist, I've been studying mining and mining communities and mining technology for 30 years or a little longer, and the archaeological research has always been about what was mining life like, how did mines operate at different places, different times for different people, what did they do for their communities, how do they build communities around them. And after many decades of studying mining communities and mining history as an archaeologist, one of my colleagues here at Michigan Tech, who is an energy policy scholar and a lawyer, came into my office one day to say, hey, you know about mining and mining history. Why is it that here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, people don't use water power to generate electricity? And why is it that nobody has used these undergrounds as an opportunity to solve the energy storage crisis, because he had just returned from a conference in the UK, and while there over in England, he had seen a presentation about this place in Wales called Electric Mountain, where a historical slate mine was converted into a pumped hydro energy storage system. And it was shocking to him because it was an example of an adaptive reuse of this industrial landscape that was in the middle of a UNESCO Heritage Park for slate landscapes and the cultural history of slate and nature preserves in Wales. And he was looking around at our landscape here in the Keweenaw and thinking about that landscape around those slate mines and thinking, it's so logical. Why hasn't anyone tried this? And we launched into a long conversation in his office, writing on the whiteboard and drawing pictures and running some calculations, and just sort of kicked off this major research area that has continued now. It's 8-9 years later to this day, we're continuing to work on this.
So it seems like what it did is it kind of tapped into first an obvious question of what are you even working with these mine spaces, these shafts and all of that underground, which must be where the mapping also then came in, correct?
That's right. And it's funny, again, there's so many layers of humor here, but as an archaeologist, one of my rules with students when we're out doing archaeological survey, and again, you would think, boy, that sounds weird to be doing an archaeology survey in a historic mine. But if we were doing some ancient Roman mine or some mine in Bronze Age China, no one would think it unusual that an archaeologist would be interested in that, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea that we would study a 19th century copper mine or a 20th century iron mine or whatever, even a modern mining system, isn't so extraordinary. But when I'm out with my students and we're making maps, we almost exclusively operate on the surface of the ground, and we do not go underground. And because my first rule of archaeological field school is no dying, so no one's allowed to go underground, right?
Oh, yeah.
The idea of underground exploration, I know that many people in our area do it for a fun leisure activity as a hobby, but it is not something to be done casually. Underground exploration is dangerous. And so we began our work on the underground working from above ground using historic documents and maps, drawings, photographs, oral histories, right? And then trying to correlate that and project what the underground looked like or might have looked like at various points in time based on what we could observe on the ground surface or through remote sensing today.
My goodness. Tim, do you have any estimate on how many miles of underground mine tunnels you have mapped and maybe you still have to do?
Well, we're the work that we've been doing in drawing these underground structures by hand is an extraordinarily slow and painstaking process. And as a consequence, we have really only done, of the many, many mines we've done archaeological studies of, for example, or energy studies of, we have really only done very basic mapping of the Mather mine in Negaunee. We've been looking at the Quincy mine, at the Calumet and Hecla mine here, some mines in the Copper Country. What we have been working on though is ways in which we can bring technology to bear to speed up this process dramatically by using computer tools, machine learning tools, algorithmic tools, and machine vision tools, and some remote sensing equipment and robotics equipment as different ways of mapping the underground so we can begin doing it more quickly. But we have not mapped a fraction of the underground of the Copper Country alone, not a fraction. The state has an abandoned mines database that includes underground sketches of the mines that was completed in the 1990s. Michigan Tech researchers worked with the DNR and the minerals management people in the state of Michigan, and we built this database, and it has been maintained and updated over the years by DNR staff and Eagle staff. And so that is out there, but I've never tried to use it to calculate a total linear distance. Here's what I can tell you, that no one has ever compiled a comprehensive master list, even of just identifying the locations of abandoned mines in the United States, because it's not regulated by a single agency, right? And so there is no one database that you can go look at. The biggest database of abandoned mines was one maintained by the United States Geological Survey, and it had over 300,000 entries for the world, of which the vast majority were in North America. But the tens, hundreds of thousands of entries in this spreadsheet detailing mines, big and small, mineral occurrences, quarries, so that the mines like the Quincy mine up here in the Copper Country, which is a mile wide and a mile deep, counts as one. And then someone would go out and file a mineral claim at some location and maybe dig an exploratory shaft 30 feet deep, and that counts as one, right?
Yeah.
So it's a really messy system, and each state, each tribe, each federal agency maintains an individual abandoned mines database that then there have been some efforts to try and correlate them, but the records are scattered, and they're of very widely varied quality. And they are available in different ways in different states, so that some states make the data publicly available, other states, they keep the data under lock and key.
So it's real interesting here. What I'm hearing here, Tim, is that you're saying that there's a lot of information, but it hasn't really all been sort of collated and put together. And it sounds like it may not be able to be done just because there's so much of it out there. But why is this important? I guess, why is it important to have an idea? I mean, even if you're looking specifically in the Copper Country in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, why is it important to have this information? What's the potential? Where can this go?
Yeah. I can give you a couple of examples that help to understand. In my own experience, when I was in graduate school in Nevada, I was in Reno, and my mentor was doing some archaeology in Virginia City, which is a famous gold and silver mining region in the Sierra Nevadas there. And while I was in school, one random day, the elementary school parking lot fell into a mine. And it just happened. It just happened that it was a Sunday, right?
Oh.
If it had been like a midday Monday morning, who knows, right? Count the lucky stars in the community that it happened on a Sunday morning. But this happens all the time in post-mining landscapes.
Yes, it does.
Because people dug stuff all over. They didn't really keep records, and as a consequence, there are quite literally, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of miles of underground workings at various depths in all different kinds of geology. And it's really common for a highway construction crew or a municipal road crew to break through into even here in the Copper Country, to break through into a mine at it when they're doing sewer work, right? Mm-hmm. Homeowner construction or major infrastructure construction. It's absolutely critical that we know as best we can where these places are so that we can avoid those kinds of disasters. We can keep track of those landscapes and try and anticipate problems. But it goes way beyond that. Like abandoned mines are also, when they're dry, they're also habitat. And animals like bats love abandoned mines, so they'll colonize abandoned mines, right? Even they'll colonize active mines. When those mines are flooded, they're often flooded with water that picks up contaminants from inside the mine, and so there's discharge questions of the mine water, and there are environmental concerns, even from legacy mines that can be quite old. They will continue to have these legacy concerns of water quality. all of these different kinds of concerns vary widely from district to district, region to region, because of the way things were mined and the types of geology it was mined in. And none of that counts the application of bringing in new mines to rework old mining remains, which is a perennial thing in mining. It doesn't count the use of mining in tourism and in public memory infrastructure. The copper country, the Quincy mine is a wonderful example where, since the Quincy mine took over from the Arcadian as our primary underground tourist destination, there are tens of thousands of people tour underground in the Quincy mine a year. The Quincy mine is a major economic engine for Hancock in bringing visitors. But even more than just that, it's where we bring school kids to teach them our history, right? It's a place of public memory that really matters to people. People take wedding pictures there, right? So the mines are living landscapes, and yet this other trend that's been out there for many years now has been this slowly percolating problem with our energy infrastructure, where our energy infrastructure, we were able to coast for a long time, decades, over the fact that we had built out a bunch of energy infrastructure post-war into the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and then increasing energy efficiency meant that even though we were using more energy, we didn't have a crisis in our energy infrastructure, even though we stopped really building and investing in energy infrastructure. But the consequence of that now is that now we're entering this perfect storm for our energy infrastructure, and that's a whole other story. But what that's meant is that you have this crisis in energy infrastructure. One potential type of solution is to look at adaptively reusing these underground spaces as energy infrastructure assets, where you solve one set of social, economic, and environmental problems of having abandoned mines that present challenges to their communities, to turning those into opportunities to redevelop assets to modernize the energy infrastructure. And it runs this whole range of things, from electrical energy storage, like pumped hydropower, that we'll talk more about, but also compressed air systems, also different kinds of geothermal systems, different kinds of gravity systems. There's a whole range of things in energy space that could be deployed into these undergrounds, and it's a terribly exciting opportunity that we're trying to cultivate more now, where what we're really trying to do at Michigan Tech is to create the tools that will allow this optimal match to happen between energy companies, technology companies, and post-mining communities and land agencies, where they can all identify their priorities and find sweet spots where particular technologies will work in particular places to particular advantage, as a way of helping those post-mining communities to chart their kind of entry into this next major 100-year span of time for our energy infrastructure.
We're talking with Tim Scarlett here today, who is Associate Professor of Archaeology at Michigan Tech University in Houghton, Michigan, talking about the importance of mapping and keeping the data of checking these mines. That was an extensive answer that says that there is a lot that is tied to this. This is a big project. It obviously takes collaboration. You're talking about Michigan Tech, but who else is working on this with you, and how is this evolving maybe into the next level of what you are doing as a researcher like you are?
Yeah, it's exciting, and it's exciting because I've been watching this now for a while, and as an archaeologist and an anthropologist, I kind of came to this from the outside, right? And so I see all of the potential and the development of these things, and it's really fascinating because what's happened over the last really 10, 15 years is that we had this sort of renewable energy gold rush, and like any gold rush, a lot of what got mined in that gold rush was investors, and then it wasn't until the things matured a little bit when things settled down and people really figured out how to make money, and that's now this very promising landscape of economic development. And at Michigan Tech, when we started this idea, we were talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, and students were very excited because it looked like this avenue to develop a really sustainable model for building major infrastructure, something that was not, it still isn't really possible in many, for many reasons in the country. And what we eventually realized was you can't talk about this hypothetically because you just keep spinning your wheels of the possibilities and the potentials and the what-ifs. We finally realized what we needed to do was just pick a spot and do a study and look at what it looked like. And so we went through a process of assembling an interdisciplinary team across campus. And Michigan Tech is a small research-intensive school, so we have tremendous expertise here, but not a lot of administrative burden. So we were able to assemble these interdisciplinary teams of faculty and students really quickly, and we received a grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for our first study, and we did a techno-economic analysis of a mine site at the former Mather mine in the community of Negaunee in Michigan's Iron Ranges, near the city of Marquette, for your listeners. And as we did that study, it started just before COVID, and then as we ran through COVID with this study, we were able to hold some limited public meetings, and it evolved and took shape differently. But as we finished our study, and we were able to show that these ideas are totally financially viable under different models of different ways of running things. You can set these up, and under some scenarios, they make money as they are, just as with no additional incentives and no changes to the current regulatory or economic system. Which opened up the question then, if we wanted to make a lot of this kind of development happen, could we develop roadmaps to help communities and legislators and policymakers cultivate these systems, draw investment to these systems? And so when we published our first study, that started to get a traction. It made the news around the world, fairly widespread news, and we began to get contacted from all over the United States and the world. And we began supporting explorations by industrial partners here in the upper Midwest. We began supporting different explorations in places like South Africa and Australia and in the United Kingdom. We developed a network of collaborators in Germany and in Sweden, throughout Scandinavia. And those companies, those academic researchers, all of these people in these communities are continuing to move forward with different takes on these potential energy storage solutions, and it's tremendous. It's really tremendously exciting. In the United States, after the changeover in presidential administrations between President Biden to President Trump, there were a lot of changes to administrative priorities in different agencies, and that sort of paused a lot of energy planning because no one was going to be jumping ahead with $100, $200 million, $300 million projects while there was uncertainty in the world. But those uncertainties have been resolved, and people are continuing to move forward. And while I'm not going to be able to speak in any detail about any particular industrial partnerships, we continue to support all kinds of inquiries at all levels, from very initial preliminary conversations about ideas to people looking at site selection, trying to figure out how to make decisions about these large infrastructure projects.
Oh, Tim, it sounds like you are about to write a new chapter in our mining history. How can listeners stay connected to you and your research?
Well, we have a website. We got together through the Mather experience, and we created a research team in our community. We named it the Keweenaw Energy Transitions Lab, or KETL, K-E-T-L. And so we have a website, ketl.info, Ketl.info, and that's where we'll be placing things. It is the website's on a little of the back burner right now as we're working on a number of different kinds of things. But as we release public information, the university's been very good about getting these stories out. So people can follow us at KETL, or they can follow us on LinkedIn. They can follow me on LinkedIn. And we share updates periodically about different aspects of the project. This student team working with building a robotic platform to try and remote map a flooded mine underground. This particular group over in Sweden developing a mine, or this mine site in Finland that's an incubator for energy storage and high-tech mining and underground environments. And this group in Nevada wants to build a discotheque in a mine, right? we just put all this kind of stuff out there. And it is fun. We also are responsive to inquiries of people who would like to come together for talks. We've done slideshows and presentations and web-based presentations for professional communities and for energy agencies, for all different kinds of people. So we're really happy, and people can drop us email. Our information is all available on the university's website.
Well, we will make sure that also gets shared with the posting of this conversation as the podcast. Tim Scarlett here on the line with us. He's an associate professor of archaeology at Michigan Tech University in Houghton. We're talking about mine mapping. You know, Tim, there has just been a lot that you have presented us here in a fairly compact, about half-hour conversation or so, but there is so much more out there, and we encourage people to go look into it. But I have one quick question, and that is that how long have you been with Michigan Tech University, and how, if I can follow that up with, has Michigan Tech, having its history with mining and mining technology, been sort of an assistance in this conversation and this research?
Yeah, great question. It is, I think, in many ways, the fact that this happened at Michigan Tech is unique because of Michigan Tech. The old Michigan College of Mines, has evolved over the years to a research-intensive university. It goes well beyond mining, and these days the people in mining are working, of course, in terrestrial mining, but they're also talking about like mining water crystals on the moon, right? They have robotic mining. We're doing a lot of different things in mining at Michigan Tech, and reclamation and sustainable mining and things like that. And because of its history, some years ago in the 1990s, the faculty in the Department of Social Sciences was thinking about ways that they could begin to develop graduate programs that would make sense at Michigan Tech, which would connect social science research with all the different kinds of research happening. And they began building on the theme of industrial archaeology. And so we started working on this idea of bringing in faculty, not because someone gave us a giant chunk of money, but because someone would retire and we'd replace that person. Slowly over time, we built this industrial archaeology group, and we began to offer a master's degree in the early 1990s, and then that began to add to think about industrial history more broadly and think about industrial heritage and the role in which the past plays in modern industrial and post-industrial societies, and adding to that another group of faculty in our department began to coalesce around environmental and energy policy and the implications of post-industrial and industrializing communities. And then those evolved into this creative effort that we're doing now, because it's really at this intersection of industrial heritage sites and what those sort of resources, the liabilities are that are really assets, and how do we think of them as assets? How do we understand them as assets rather than simply of thinking of them as an environmental liability or an economic liability?
Tim, Tim, I just want to say that, you've just, that's a whole other level of a conversation that could be had, because to me, it ties into with the Keweenaw, the historical park that is there as a national park with what was before. You're looking at learning from what was before to learn moving ahead. You've shared a lot of good information with us here today. Again, one more time, I just want to ask you, how can people find out a little bit more about what you're doing? We'll link it all up, but just a quick and easy way to find out a little bit more about this research.
I'll give you some links you can add to the podcast website, and then, or maybe we drop them in the descriptions. But if you Google Keweenaw Energy Transitions Lab, or since people can't spell Keweenaw, if they just Google Timothy Scarlett Abandoned Mines Energy, you're going to find this, and my colleagues Roman Sidortsov and Anna Dierson and all the others that we work with here at Michigan Tech. As people can just Google that, and they'll hit us prominently in their Google search results. There are things on YouTube, there's things on Google, there's things on LinkedIn, and like I said, the online stories are really pretty terrific. So,
Tim, we appreciate your time today, and all the best with this. And I hope that anybody that looks into like the Keweenaw National Historical Park and all of that has a chance to tap into what you're doing on a modern level with it. And we certainly appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And we've got to have you back, Tim.
Yeah.
Thank you both. That'd be wonderful.
It's Tim Scarlett, who is an associate professor of archaeology at Michigan Tech University in Houghton. And, Frida, for me, growing up in that area, that is my hometown area of Houghton, Hancock, the Copper Country, all of that, and having somewhat of an insight of what it was like, it's very interesting and refreshing for me to have an eye on the future based on what came before. And that wasn't always the thing, especially when the mines up there in the 60s closed. They were just... everything was abandoned. Everything was left. But that's where the Keweenaw National Historical Park comes in. They have restored these buildings and these spaces. That's where all of these other locations up and down the Keweenaw Peninsula as a national park are worth going to go see.
Really a wonderful new way to look at our old mines. And when you think about that energy storage and what that can be, and also the whole idea of what data centers are around our country, what are these mines available to become, and the opportunity, the potential. Who knows? Who just knows? But Tim's on it.
Yeah, we thank Tim Scarlett for joining us here on the Lake Superior podcast. He is an associate professor of archaeology at Michigan Tech University in Houghton. That's pretty much going to do it for us this time around. But if there's an idea you'd like to hear, just drop us a note through the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, and we'll take a look at putting it on for another future podcast. But that's going to do it. I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida Waara. Thanks for listening. The National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, NPLSF, is the only official nonprofit 501c3 fundraising partner of the National Park Service for all 5 U.S. national park sites on Lake Superior.
To learn more about NPLSF projects and programs, you can visit the website at nplsf.org or friend them on Facebook.
I'm Frida Waara.
And I'm Walt Lindala. Thanks for listening to the Lake Superior podcast.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from?
And by the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. As a nonprofit, we rely on support from listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider a donation. To learn more and make a gift, visit us at www.gosuperior.org.